Hi, my name is Megan Alisa, and I'm an Evidential psychic medium. If you're new around here, welcome to my channel. And on my channel, I talk about mediumship development, spirituality. I do paranormal investigations to experiment with the spirit world, and I try to help demystify mediumship for you. Today, I have a very special interview with one of my teachers, Eileen Davies, who is a spiritualist medium who has been working as a medium for a very long time in her life. Eileen Davies is a tutor at the Arthur Findlay College, which is a world-renowned psychic and mediumistic studies college in the UK, which I have had the pleasure of learning at several times with her as my teacher. So I've been really lucky. And Eileen has graced us today with her time and her energy to have a discussion with me about mediumship and where mediumship has been and where it's going. And we talk about spirituality and living life. So I really hope you enjoy this. Make sure to put your comments below and let us know what you think. If you have any questions, I may feature your question and do a video response to answer anything you have regarding mediumship development, psychic development, spirituality, the spirit world, etc. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel and hit the little notification bell so you know when I put out new content. When I recorded the interview, I accidentally recorded it on speaker view. So you will see Eileen the whole time, but you will also hear me, just not see me this time. I'm just going to start by welcoming Eileen Davies. Eileen, I'm so very, very excited to have you here to talk about the spirit world, really, to have a conversation about the spirit world, to find out more about the things that you've been doing, the things that are important to you as a teacher. And I have been so blessed to have you as a mentor and a teacher, and someone I look up to, really, someone that I really want to try to emulate with who I am as a medium and as a teacher. And that's because you really live what you say and you live from your heart. And like that is very apparent in what you do. And I love that. So welcome. And thank you for coming to talk.
Thank you so much, Megan. It's a real joy and a pleasure to have an opportunity to share some experiences and my understanding of communication between the two worlds and just basically my love for the spirit.
Yeah. And that's what I love about you, because not only are you really full of so much inspiration from the spirit world, but you have years of, working with them, and that shows with, everything that you teach and what you talk about. And I'm sure you've had people say this to you, and I'm sure you're aware of this as well, but when you are with you, essentially in the presence of you, and you are being inspired by the spirit, there's a certain power, there's a certain thing that kind of comes with that, that all of us really feel inspired by, which is such a beautiful thing. Can you tell us more about how this all sort of started for you?
How it all started, I was one of those many mediums, and I know in my generation and the generation before me, it was very normal, very common for mediums to say, oh, I used to keep the presence of spirit children when I was young, and I would see auras and lights around people. I have to say, with hand on my heart, that that was my reality when I was a child. And invariably that created a sense of my parents thinking I was a little bit strange. I was always in the corner speaking to invisible, obviously to my parents and the rest of my family, spirit children. But as my mediumship unfolded, when I was older, it became apparent that they were real. And I got the most incredible proofs in different ways of their reality. And I think that's absolutely amazing. And I think that it's really important that if, there are any parents out there listening, I think it's really important to not over encourage, but to gently nurture and support children if they are seen to be, talking to invisible friends or play friends, because children live in their spiritual senses until about the age of 7 normally. And unless, of course, they are projected into the world of technology, which is the case with a lot of youngsters now. But it's very natural. They're very connected children. And I think it's sad if we don't allow children and encourage them to live in their other reality and spirit world. And then life happens, doesn't it? So I was definitely one of those people. It's apparent now, though, which I think is really interesting. Speaking with a lot of people who are developing their mediumship in these present times, that they didn't have that same background or connection with the spirit. But that doesn't mean their ability is any the less, definitely not. It just means it's different and fitting for every generation and time that we're living in. So yes, I was one of those children, but then in my teens, I lived a very normal life in my teens, like any other teenager. But the awareness of the other world was always there, even though it wasn't as powerful and as strong. It was still there. And of course, we speak about intuition, and I think that I could say that everybody who develops their mediumistic powers always has a sense of knowing about certain things, or realization that something's going to unfold or happen in a particular way, and invariably it does. And that's this deep connection we have with our spirit. I think it's very common now that people tend to think that psychic or psychism isn't, it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's an inherent part of our mediumistic nature, and it's woven very intricately into a mediumistic communication very often. But it doesn't mean, it's certainly not a bad thing. And it does seem to be the school of thought out there, and people get obsessed with, oh my God, did I go into the psychic? And it's very, very important that you understand your own inner nature. And psychic comes from soul, which is self, and which means essentially we're connecting with our spirit. And when we connect fully with our spirit, it means we link with universal consciousness. So it all comes together. So yeah.
So it's interesting, going back to talking about the childhood. I noticed in your book, which I have right here, which is a freaking amazing book. If you guys want to go and order this from her website, I'm halfway through, but it's really good. It's Mediumship Touching the Stars, which we will read a little bit from later. But I noticed there's some quotes and things from Steiner. And before I realized I was a medium, later on down the road, I felt this strong pull to have my kids go to a Waldorf school. I was doing the whole Waldorf sort of a thing, natural, head, heart, hands, and all of that. And I found myself getting lucky to be able to happen to live in an area where there is a Waldorf charter school that I could get in for my kids. And we got in on a lottery. But I never realized at that point the connection of Steiner to all of this world. I just felt this innate pull to it. So the more I discover about that, I've always been like, wow, that's so interesting how these things sort of come about, but I love the idea of letting kids be kids and exploring that imaginative place that is naturally within them, like you're saying. And I always tell people as well, we don't want to, like you're saying, we don't want to feed the ego and say, oh, you're very special, right? And we don't want to do the opposite of what happened to me. Oh, that's coincidence, that's nothing. Or even worse, oh, that's evil, right? We don't want to do any of those things. To stay more in the, oh, tell me more about it. Oh, that's interesting, kind of more like that. So I love that. And then I think also too, I think for many of us that don't necessarily have floating heads and things that come to us when we're kids, right? We have other experiences that we may not even be truly aware of. Like, like you're saying, like I have these things that happen, or I would know things, or I would, have all these sorts of experiences, but I never put two and two together until much later on. Which I find interesting as well. But I think it's very normal for people to also go into like their teenage years, like you did, where it's much more about being human, right? It's much more about just sort of having that experience. Yeah. And that's where you kind of started though, to move more into the working though, right? To kind of go to a spiritualist church and to kind of find your path in that way?
Totally, because I was 17 when my father passed, and obviously it created a great impact on me because by his nature, he was somebody that encouraged a use of the imagination. He really, really brought out, I believe, that sense of wonder and magic in me about the world around me. And so for me, he was somebody that embodied spirituality. You know, he walked his talk. He didn't profess to believe anything in particular. It was just who he was as an individual. So it was a great loss for me, my father passing when I was 17. And from that point, I made up my mind that I would go and seek out a spiritualist church. And of course, I was very, very fortunate being living where I was at the time, because I experienced basically the most remarkable mediums in the UK. I say in the UK, dare I say the world. Wonderful mediums such as Gordon Higginson and Albert Best and Ursula Roberts and Stuart Lawson, remarkable people who were beyond excellent, if you can be that. They just brought this power and presence of the other world with them. And so I felt, and still feel to this day, so in awe and so inspired by them. Because just to be in the presence of people who really know what the power is, who have been touched by this other world, it opens us in a very, very sacred way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we can ever be the same after that. So the very first person I ever saw demonstrating was Gordon Higginson. So the bar was set really high.
But that's good.
I thought everything was like that.
Right. You would hope, you would wish that, you know, we would have. And I know I've heard, you know, stories of him, you know, do you want to be a mediocre medium or do you want to be an excellent medium, you know, and that kind of a thing. And I think that's something to think about, to always be pushing the boundaries of what's possible, not
Mm-hmm.
through our own force, but through our surrender, through our giving that over to our spirit team and having that relationship and knowing there's more, you know, knowing there's even more that, you know, even we look at the past mediums like Gordon Higginson or Estelle Roberts, or, you know, any of the other Battling Bertha, all the great mediums of our past. There could be even more that we are not even aware of if we just gave that over to the spirit world. And so like, that's really what I'm trying to help kind of bring about for people, because I think people in this day and age, especially, we're very caught up in the mental mediumship. And, you know, we give a message, we're done. The next person, we give a message, and it's sort of turned into this, I don't know, this less spiritual understanding of what's actually happening. And then when we have the TV shows, which have been, you know, like with everything in this world, good and bad, right? We have both. But I want to try to help, you know, by talking to people like you and talking to people that really get this and come from a different time where, you know, the understanding of this was different, you know, and obviously you're doing that with your teaching and you're working with people and helping them. So can you talk about kind of like what you've seen over your time of being a medium and how things have changed?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. It has changed. In my days, you know, when I say my days, obviously, I was 19 when I first entered a spiritualist church, and I never stopped going after that. That was such an incredible moment for me. And it had very much the association, as it rightfully it has, with religion and everything that was sacred and divine. And I think that what we've gone through is, because it's become very popularized because of social media and, as you just said, the television and everything, we've lost that sense of this is something sacred. And so it isn't just about giving a communication from the other world. I think very often now people get stuck in the message, and they think the message is all there is to it. But we need to look beyond the message as to why the spirit people are communicating in the first place. And that isn't just you know, the incredible realization that, you know, life is eternal, there is no death, and they're still who we loved, and all those lovely things. It's much, much more. It should take us to this realization, where we recognize who we are, that we're not just this physical form that showed up here on the planet at this moment, but we are spiritual beings. And so it should lead us to the door of our own transformation, and it should give us meaning and purpose to life. So to answer your question, I think essentially we've gone from a place or phase from years ago of natural mediumship, where mediums were very natural. They weren't schooled in any one way, but just taught to listen to the other world.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it at the beginning of my book, if you are really wanting to develop mediumship, there's two things you need to really, really do. And one is to listen with your whole self to the spirit world. And the second is to love with your whole heart, because very often now it's becoming manufactured, and they're leaving love out of it.
Right.
And I think that we should never, ever lose the sense of awe and wonder, of the fact that communication takes place, that the spirit people love us enough to want to make us realize through the grace of their presence and the wonder of a communication, that there's magic in existence to our being here. And I think it's so much more. And I think we're in a very dangerous place at the moment as far as mediumship is concerned, that we do lose, or we could do, and that's why we need to encourage people to look at themselves, to look at what motivates them, what inspires them, understand their own selves first. Who am I? Who am I really, beyond all the labels and attachments and roles we play? And what is the real self? I think that's something that's very, very important that we ask ourselves. And of course, learning not just the art of meditation. I was always taught, real meditation, we should always experience at some point that we are filled with tears. And that's a funny statement, but it's not really, because we meet ourselves when we meditate. And if we don't first understand who we really are, and we allow ourselves to be moved in these meditative states to understand who we really are, and all the things that sometimes we push down in life when we go through difficulties and trauma and stress, because everybody everywhere has their own fair share, nobody's exempt, but to come to terms with it, and not expect, on the other hand, not to expect ourselves to be perfect. In the trance states and trance demonstration some while ago, the spirit, when they were speaking through me, said that it's too great a burden to expect ourselves to be perfect, but what we need to do is perfect our love. And I think that's the key, is to perfect this art of love and loving. First, loving ourselves and unconditional, beyond judgment. And then if we can do that for ourselves, we can do it with other people. So we can look beyond all the irritants that and failings within others, because we don't see that anymore when we look through the eyes of love. So I think that's really important, so that we are aware that it's something very special. Each communication will never come around ever again quite in the same way it has in each moment that we're working, and to respect the spirit world. I mean, what you said about the competitiveness that's out there now, it's sad, because I've always been aware that without the other world, it just doesn't happen. And I can work only because of my spirit team behind me, and people may not see them when I stand on a platform to demonstrate, but I am aware of them as I feel the power and the presence, their presence.
Definitely. I've come to realize, excuse me, I've come to realize as a teacher, what I'm really doing is removing the conditioning and the self-limiting beliefs and the things this world has taught the brain and the busyness of the brain. What I'm really doing is doing that, and helping them to realize the other aspect of themselves, which is the part that is the connector, right? The part that meets the other world. And so I'm not really trying to, do much more than that, honestly, with what I'm doing. I'm teaching them good habits, right? I'm teaching them good habits with working ethics are very important. The personal responsibility of this work, understanding, everything that we say we're responsible for. And that this is about healing. This is about healing and upliftment. And if that's not happening, then there's something that needs to be worked on. Something needs to be tweaked here, because that's very important. So I think, like, for me as a teacher, that's really what I'm cultivating within people, and the power, obviously understanding the power, which is very, very important, key to this work, because you'll see mediums work on the platform that don't understand the power, haven't developed the power, and it's a very different experience than someone who has developed the power. It's like the spirit world's there but not there. Does that make sense? It's like
Absolutely, absolutely. It quite intrigues me, actually, because there are some people that can go through the motions of giving a communication, but there's no power and presence of the
right.
other world there. And
Yes.
I find that very interesting. A real spiritual medium, everybody present will be touched by the power,
Mhm.
and you can feel it.
Yeah.
And I was always taught that, for anybody that enters a demonstration and they listen to a real spiritual medium, if they're open and receptive just a tiny bit, they will walk out of that after that demonstration changed, transformed in some way.
Mhm.
And for me, that's real spiritual mediumship. You may not get communication, but the fact that you've been held within this incredible power that isn't just around the medium but fills the entire room creates an innate inner transformation.
Mhm.
And that's what we need more of now. We need more mediums who really know what the power is. I remember when I was, going through my mediumistic unfoldment, and before I was allowed to work at other spiritualist churches, I had to demonstrate on a Sunday morning service with Gordon Higginson. And of course, that was very, very nerve-wracking, and as you would imagine, it was, because he was he is, and the most, I'm going to say is because he's not past tense. You can't
Right.
speak about people being a spiritualist and say there or was or is, or because he was the most remarkable spiritualist medium that I've ever been blessed to see. And after the demonstration, I was allowed to give 3 communications, and went down into the room below the main church, and he said I'd moved into the power rather well, um, rather beautifully, and that was it. And then he told the officials and the church appropriate people that yes, I was ready to go and serve other churches. And it took me some years after that, I have to be honest, to really understand what he meant by that statement. And indeed, it was a much greater compliment than I actually realized, because I was in my early 20s at the time, and I realized after what he was really referring to. And it sort of arises within you as a recognition when you really feel the presence of the spirit world and the power of the spirit. And from that moment there arises this real comprehension of what the power is. And it's the same with a medium in the trance states. A lot of people can speak with their eyes closed, doesn't mean they're in trance.
Exactly.
But you can't manufacture the presence and power of the unseen world. And that's when you really know, because a lot of people are interested in trance at the moment. And I have to say that Gordon predicted many years ago that would happen. And it's wonderful, but it isn't just closing your eyes and let whatever thought comes into your mind be expressed. It's the process of gradually surrendering more and more and more, and
Mhm.
allowing the influence of the other world to express themselves, the nectar, the undiluted teachings from the spirit. That's what we're in need of, because not only can we learn from their wisdom and insight, but we are the richer for having partaken of the power that they bring forward with them when they use a trance medium.
Absolutely. I mean, as someone who has been sitting for trance for the last 4.5 years, and developing that, there's no experience like it, really. I mean, the love and the power and the feeling of their presence descending upon you, essentially, and blending within you is something truly special. And yeah, it saddens me to see some of the things being said that are trance, or in a trance state, that are not, that are out there. And obviously, you know, in so many different ways, we have people on every side of us, you know, either frauding, you know, unknowingly sometimes, right? Just because they have been trained and developed to understand, or the people that just don't understand this stuff at all, and may have had a bad personal experience with one of these other sectors of people. So we have these sort of on all sides that we're learning how to live with as mediums, right? We're learning how to kind of get through that. Um, did you ever have a really difficult experience with either a hardcore skeptic? And I'm a healthy skeptic. I believe being healthy skeptic is a good thing, but then there's, you know, cynics. There's people that are really just closed off or whatever. Did you ever have like a really awful experience? And like, how did you kind of, as a sensitive person, right? We're all sensitive people. We have to learn how to not let that bother us. And that's hard.
Are you referring to the trance states or
Yeah,
just
just
with a normal
like, I guess with anything, you know, both, or, but yeah.
I think that, you know, what I've gathered over the years is even with physical mediumship, and you know, you when you're in the presence of a remarkable physical medium and there is the phenomena of the spirit, if somebody isn't inwardly ready to believe, they will rationalize it and justify it. And so it isn't so much in, you know, we can speak about any level of mediumistic expression here. It isn't so much about the medium providing the quality of evidence, is it as equally so important that the person is inwardly ready to receive and hear. You know, because there've been lots of times I've witnessed people saying, "Oh, that wasn't authentic and that wasn't real," and you know, and I remember one sitting I gave this gentleman. He must have been in his early 40s, and his mother immediately came forward, and I heard her say, you know, she passed with pancreatic cancer. She'd given all this information, and he said he was very sort of, you could feel that he wasn't really ready to embrace this reality that life is eternal. And then he said to me, I think if that was my mother, she'd be saying something far more important and significant than that, you know. And so I stopped and I said, well, you wouldn't meet somebody in the first minute divulge all your innermost secrets. You would build up to that naturally and gradually. And I said, that's exactly what your mother's doing. She's already told me how she's passed with specific information. And he said, well, all right, then you can continue. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, I'm not carrying on. I said, you just insulted your mother and you've insulted me because you haven't given her a chance to, you know, relay what she wants to express. And I think that's another important thing. We must always meet the other world with an openness, with a generosity of spirit, and you know, not a closed mind, because some people, the people that come wanting all their I's dotted and the T's crossed in a sitting are often the ones that, you know, don't have enough generosity of spirit to open their hearts and minds enough to let them really in. So much it is about not just the capabilities of the medium, but also the receptivity of the person in front of you. And of course, you can still work, of course you can, but you won't reach the same potentiality that you could if they were just that little bit more flexible and giving.
I've definitely found that if I've had people that have more of a closed off energy in front of me, more of the prove it attitude, you know, in their energy, I've found that it feels harder. I can feel using more of my own power because I know it takes their energy, mind, and spirit to make it all work properly. Right. So I can feel that sort of like, sort of feeling, with my energy. So it always is a little bit harder. And definitely there's always more information when there's more ease, right? And there's a natural flow to the energy and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
All the
Definitely.
difference.
How do you feel? So I guess I'll talk about this in the nicest way I can. How do you feel the spiritualist church has gotten to this sort of cookie cutter, you must check mark all these things off on the list sort of idea of mediumship? Like there seems to be this idea of if you don't do it like this and say it like this, then you can't be on the platform and you're not qualified, get off. There seems to be, I guess it's a nice way to say it. I'm not sure if that's very nice. Very nice. But it seems to me that's what's kind of happening. So how do you think that happened?
Well, I know exactly how that happened, actually. I mean, I was very fortunate, I have to say, because I, came into spiritualism before that sort of syndrome hit, went out in the world there. And, I was sort of around because I think the early days, you're most impressionable, and you're creating the foundation, aren't you, on what's going to follow. And literally, I was just taught just to listen to the other world, to listen with my awareness, and let the energy, let the presence and the power speak to you. And then after that, I think it was sometime in the mid to late 80s, there was a format that was introduced in spiritualism and it was called CERT, and you had to tick all the boxes with the criteria, the height, the age, and and I always say, well, if you ask me, I couldn't tell you any of my loved ones' heights in the spirit world, because I think it's the least interesting thing. Somebody's age and height and weight, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what makes your heart sing. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know how you feel within yourself. And that's about people here, but also in the spirit world as well. And of course, we always remember things that have touched us powerfully, things of emotional significance. So that definitely came. I won't actually name the actual people that brought that sort of format forward, because that'd be very, very, very wrong of me. But it seemed to create then a tidal wave. It seemed to spread all over the globe of this little tick box, syndrome of you've got to get all the boxes and all. And you can actually feel when sometimes when I've been working with students at the Arthur Findlay College, and they're searching for the age and they're searching for the height, and I said, well, why are you looking for the height? Because your spirit communicator is wanting to say it's mother. She's not wanting to say, what height she doesn't care. And I think thankfully we're getting a little bit out of that now, thank goodness. And people are moving more into just listening to the other world, and because it's their story.
Right.
And I think the danger is when we try and coerce it and try and tell them what they should be telling us. Well, the spirit people have categorically said, when I've asked them about this, that they have a concept of what they need to convey and share. And so when you, the medium, go to them and say, can you give me this, can you tell me that, it really affects the flow of the information. So that's something that's really, really sad. And it's very interesting because Estelle Roberts, not that I'm old enough to have ever met her. I would have loved to, by the way, but I'm not that old. And she was obviously a remarkable medium, an absolute all-rounder, and had phenomenal abilities. Her spirit control red cloud said in the trance states that the spirit people, the spirit communicators, rehearse and prepare what they're going to say, what they're going to convey. Now that's just mind-blowing, isn't it? To think that they're going through this sort of little rehearsal in preparedness for what they're going to convey. I think that's so remarkable. So even more important that we don't, because that's adding to what they said to me one day when I was sitting and asking them, because I've always said to the other world, I so want to be over there so I can know what it's like I can really know firsthand what communication is really all about from your perspective. But maybe I don't want to do that quite yet, or maybe, you know, it's not such a good idea for me to have a near-death experience and then try and communicate.
Right.
But
I've
you
said
know,
the same.
yeah, because it fascinates me. It just, because we only ever know it from our perspective, but it fascinates me what they're going through and how they too must learn the art of focusing their intent and concentrating like we have to, in order to convey and express what they really lovingly want to share.
Yeah. I've felt very fortunate that I have had, obviously Michael Mayo is one of your students, right? So I've had him be my mentor. You've been my mentor, Gordon Smith, and all of you have been along the same lines of give it over to the spirit world, right? So they're intelligent, right? Like you're saying, they know what they're going to say. They know it's needed for the sitter, and that it's in cooperation, right? We're working in cooperation with them. We're trusting and surrendering. And I think that I've been so fortunate to have that teaching because that's how I work, right? And I obviously felt there has been a lot of growth within me as a medium just through that. It's not through certain exercises. It's not through trying to get certain kinds of information. It's through saying to the spirit world, I'm here, use me. I want to be as free as I possibly can in my mind, that you can use anything, and really just giving that over. And I always think it's interesting because people are like, well, how do you get names? And how do you get this? And how do you get that? And I just say, I ask if it's possible, and then they make it happen. I don't try, it's just, it
Yeah,
happens, right?
that's exactly it. And I do believe very, very deeply that if you really want to progress and improve and refine your abilities, then it's good to make an offering before you actually work, and say to the spirit world, well, can you help me be more specific? Can you help me deepen the connection? Or, bring in names. But the thing is that people, when they start the communication, they try then to get a name.
Right.
And when you try, it creates a tension in the energy,
Mhm.
which, and a mediumship flourishes on this fluidity, on this beautiful free flowing energy. So, and I believe the names and addresses and all those things can come in when the power's right.
Right.
But it has to come to you rather than you going to it. And that's the
Exactly.
difference.
Exactly.
And that's what people need to learn, because you can only get these very precise pieces of information when the power has reached that it's sort of zenith, when it's just
Mhm.
perfect, when it's just right. Then all wonderful pieces of quality information can come to you. But then at the same time as saying that, we shouldn't ever place a judgment on what we think is evidential information,
Quality
because
evidence, right?
yeah, because sometimes it's the most simple things and yet can have layers and layers of meaning. And
Exactly.
that's the beautiful thing, that we're dealing with an intelligent power.
Yeah, I do find mediums are the harshest critics of other mediums. And also that a lot of mediums are very self-critical when they don't really realize the meaning, the deep meaning behind this one small thing that has no significance to us because it's not for us, but it has so much for the person that's receiving it. And so I think like the more, like you're saying, we hand it over and we're trusting in their intelligence, the more we can leave it and know I touched this person and I did my job. I showed up. I tried my best to get out of the way. And, that's all I can do. Right. And then to develop, to sit with the spirit world. Oh, that's another thing. Recently, I was in a forum, a mediumship forum on Facebook, where they're talking about sitting in the power. They're asking who sits in the power. And there was a lot of people that said, oh, I don't sit in the power. That's kind of a waste of my time and this and that. And I'm like, what? You guys do not realize what this is about. It's not just about connecting for a communication. There's so much more to it than that. So can you talk about why sitting in the power is so beneficial and how important it is for our development?
It is extremely important. If you look at the history of spiritualism, our pioneers naturally sat in the power. They didn't know how to do anything else. It was before the days of creative visualization and all the different types of meditation that are available to us all now. So they just sat and they allowed themselves just to feel the presence of the other world and just to be at one with the power. And what happened? So if you go fast forward a little bit on from our early pioneers, when they were doing it very naturally and spontaneously, you had this sort of wave of, in the 60s, the sudden interest, in meditation and all that kind of thing. And people became more interested in things to do with the spirit, the power of the mind, and such like. And it was, even look at the Beatles. Even the Beatles, they sat with Maharishi Mahesh, didn't they? I think his name was, if I remember correctly. And just don't say that after a glass of wine or two. And they were taught transcendental meditation. So we went from this early just sitting in the presence of love, sitting in the power of the spirit, to learning all these different types of meditation. And then we had the creative visualization meditation that was introduced in the early 1980s. And so we sort of lost our way a bit. But it was actually my very dear friend Glyn Edwards that introduced, because he got from the spirit world, he introduces sitting in the power again. And he was told by the spirit through another trance medium that this is what needs to be reintroduced, and we need to go back to being in the presence just of love, and not actively seeking to be aware and get communication, but just to be at one and blend with the power. And when that happens, you feel at one with all life, with all existence. You know that the sum totality of your own self, isn't just squeezed into this physical body, because when you become at one with the power, you feel you're above and beyond the confines of your physical form. And it sort of develops this incredible deep love for all life, for all people, no matter what they believe or, what they've done. It opens something very powerful within you. And that's something that nourishes you. So it's by both a process of realization and recognition of your eternal self, of the power of your own spirit. And as you move into being at one with that and blending, it enables you to be at one with the spirit world, because you realize that they're not separate, that the spirit reality, you've never left that other world. It's here within you, and you experience it. And you see I've had a lot of people say, oh, we're going to do sitting in the power, and they just do a little walk in the park, in their mind. And that isn't, it's inviting the other world to be present with you, to feel them, just to draw near. And I can lose an hour easily, just sitting. And I think, where did all that time go? And it's almost like at some points you feel like you're almost like dropping off to sleep, but you're not, because there's this conscious awareness that's still functioning.
I definitely think people that don't sit in the power and don't really understand what it's about, they're missing out. They're the ones missing out, really. And their mediumship will suffer for it. And that's just the truth of it, really. Yeah. But I think either one, they don't know how to do it properly. Like you're saying, either they're going to their mind or just being, whatever, just sitting. They don't realize it's about, becoming in tune with your own spiritual energy and learning how to open that and let that become part of the atmosphere, and then allowing the spirit world to come and to be with us, right? To develop us, to do whatever, just to be there so we can feel their love, feel their presence. And it's not about getting something. I think that's another part of it, is that they think, oh, I'm supposed to get something from this. Like I'm supposed to now, something, but it's not about that. That comes as more of something that comes as a I can't find the right word, but it's something that comes from it, right? It comes from it, but it's not because we're doing, oh, I have to do this. I'm going to pull this lever and this is going to happen. And it's not like that. It happens as a natural kind of byproduct. That's the word I'm looking for. Byproduct of the sitting and blending and the being with spirit. So I hope to encourage people to realize that through us talking about it. I know you're planning to read some passages from your book, which I would love for you to do and to share. It's truly such a wonderful book. It really is. So I would love for you to do that.
I certainly will, but you're absolutely
Yeah.
right, because when we sit in the power, it's about just sitting in this passive state,
Mhm.
not to actively engaged in
Right.
seeing or doing anything, but just to be at one. And that's the whole point of sitting. It's just to be, and in that process of being, it actually, I believe, develops presence. It People who really, really sit in the power, in a very dedicated religious manner, religiously, should I say, not in a religious manner, religiously, you feel it in their presence.
Mhm.
I mean, all the great spiritual teachers I've ever met, and I've been very fortunate within the spiritualist movement and out with the spiritualist movement. If you look at the Sufi movement and the Buddhists, and I've listened to talks of some remarkable people, and when they've gone onto the platform to, do a talk, they haven't said anything for 5-10 minutes. They've just stood, and you can feel their presence. And very often they've looked at every single person in the room, and sometimes there's been 500 people there, and you can feel that there's this exchange of energy, this that they're projecting their spiritual power in some way, and it's like, if you're present, you're gathering a little bit of their essence, of their love, of their vitality to you, to add to your power in some way.
Mhm.
And I think something very, very, very sacred and special um, happens within someone when they learn what real prayer really is,
Right.
or what sitting in the power really is. Because, as I said a moment ago, we are in danger at the moment of mediumship becoming manufactured. And and the more people like yourself that really, really tries to teach the importance of people think prayer is old fashioned now, but it's not. It's vital. It nourishes your inner nature.
Mhm.
So I'm going to read this very short passage from my book, and it is about the power of prayer. It's not enough to use words when we pray. For prayer to be real, it must flow from a deep well of love within us. Because of this, no one can teach another to pray. It is a state of soul remembering of grace. The authenticity of prayer is our capacity to be at one with the essence of the words. By doing this, we give life to and invite the prayer into being as a living reality. Just as music has a vitality of its own and can be likened to a state of soul, our prayer should be a reflection of our divine nature, merging as a deep harmony with all that is within us, and a recognition this life and moment is sacred. It is important to ask ourselves, what within us actually prays?
That's beautiful and very true. Very true. I always talk about the same concept idea of real prayer isn't about words. It's
Mhm.
not about just having some words, and it's about feeling. And I know that really the language of spirit is a lot to do with feeling. It's a lot to do with that connection to ourselves, our love, and that. And so I know for me, real prayer has everything to do with connecting to that feeling, and it's about becoming in some way. It's sort of like embodying and becoming that prayer. um
Absolutely.
and so that's and it's unfortunate that when someone hears the word prayer, they have some negative entanglement sometimes to that word, because of abusive powers that have unfortunately happened. And I would love to try to take that away from people, to take that concept of this is a bad word, and this is something to hold over you in some way, right? To take away your power. No, this gives you the power. This is your power of your love, of your connection to spirit. It's through that. So it's like we have to reformulate it in our minds, right? In our modern minds of what prayer is really. So I love that. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting using the word modern prayer, but you know, it's a real prayer, and you know, it isn't about saying words that are just repetition, because that's
Right.
just words. I
Right.
mean, even if you think about the Lord's Prayer, I suppose most people are brought up in the Christian tradition, and not so much now, of course, but the Lord's Prayer would have been translated from ancient Aramaic, and then it's been translated into um, ancient Greek and Hebrew, and all the way along down the line, it's got into English, and it's totally lost its original meaning. I think something like, "O cosmic birther of all radiance and being, soften the ground upon which I walk, and carve within me a place where your holy presence can abide." Very, very different,
That's
and that's the
beautiful. Wow.
ancient Aramaic um, version. So
We need to
different.
spread that around because that is beautiful. And that touches me. Like, even compared to what we think of as the Lord's Prayer, that
Yeah.
is touching. You know what I mean? That is beautiful. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting to, because I know you also have a very worldly view of spirituality and religions. Because I think we sort of get in this strange place of stuckness with our own terminology of things, but they're all the same, right? No matter kind of what your faith is or how it's expressed, the origination of all of it is the same, right? Where we talk about the power, we talk about, doing mediumship. And then if we go to, let's say bhakti yoga, right? They're doing mantra meditation. But it is all about love and the power and that connection to self and to the greater love, right? It's sort of funny how we haven't found a way yet so much of interlapping the understandings. And I think that that's something we need to work on next, is the understanding of that. And then even still when I'm listening to, because I have a great fascination with consciousness and the study of consciousness and science. I believe in science. We're not opposite of science. That's this weird understanding of people think you have to be one or the other. No, it's not. No. But there's no overlap really between when they talk about consciousness. They leave mediumship out completely. They just kind of, maybe some very small segments. I know that there's now, isn't there a lab at Arthur Findlay College that is starting to study mediums, or is that still happening?
I haven't heard so much about that, really, to be honest. I do know that they had one or two scientific weeks where they
Mhm.
were trying to look at mediumship from a scientific perspective, which I think is really needed. And that, of course,
Yeah.
is why Arthur Findlay bequeathed the college. As a collegeist, originally he quoted psychic science for, the furtherment of knowledge, and where we could embrace, from a scientific perspective as well, and encourage the natural gifts inherent within people, which is so true. But going back to what you were just saying a moment ago, I mean, when I heard Gordon Higginson give the first address that I'd ever heard him say, and he said, as a spiritualist, and it's touched me so deeply, as a spiritualist, we can take off our shoes and go into any church, any temple, any synagogue, any chapel, and pray with the rest of them, because as a spiritualist, we know it's the same power.
Mhm.
And that is so true. And I think that if you look at religion separates. It builds a wall around, whatever belief it is, but spirituality supersedes those boundaries and unites all people together. And I think possibly interspirituality is the religion of the future, because we live now, every country is a big melting pot. We live in a multicultural society, no matter what country you live in, And I think from that, we should grow and learn and explore other people's belief systems. And I think that by finding out and exploring, that's how we create unity and diversity.
Yeah,
And I think that's the only way ahead now. It's the one and only way, not by creating walls that divide and separate, but finding a meeting place where all can be happy to express their spiritual tradition and truth.
absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And I think, especially right now with everything that's happening in the world, I think it's been very easy for people to point out the things they don't like about people and the differences between us, instead of realizing there's so much more commonality. There's so much more of, we have the same desires, really, to be loved and to love, and to dream, and to try to be ourselves and be accepted. And these are the things I think we have to focus on more now than this much more uh, you know, petty, really petty sort of understanding of each other, right? I just think that that's what we need to really move toward. And I know that it's going to be maybe difficult, but I just think that that's really what would be life changing, right? To have a different understanding, maybe looking at people from a different point of yourself, right? From more of the spirit of yourself, to see them
Absolutely,
that way.
absolutely. What has being a spiritualist done for me? Well, it's changed me. It's, I suppose, in a way, it's brought to the surface what I always knew in my own heart. But it's made me want to explore and find out about other spiritual traditions more than ever. Because it gives me a hunger to know and to understand.
Mhm.
If you look at Hinduism, they have over 3 million deities, all a manifestation and expression of the divine. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
I love.
Um, and if we can just bring that mindset that even though we're doing something very ordinary, just something maybe in the home, if we, by the power of our mind and the energy and the thoughts we bring to doing whatever that task is, we transform it from the mundane to the divine.
Mhm.
And so then everything becomes a living testimony to what we believe in our hearts. Everything becomes an offering to God, but not God that's necessarily out there, but in us all. And it's by recognizing the God within us that we have the capacity to see it and perceive it in the world around us. So we're discovering God and we're adding to God all the time as we evolve spiritually.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think a lot of people have a hard concept, a difficulty with that concept, but I somewhere within me, that resonates. As we evolve and grow, we are adding to this power.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, and if someone's uncomfortable with the word God, there's many words and names. All of them are just names that humans have come up with, essentially, to give a name to this power. So if divine, or all that is, or the I am that I am, or any of the names that are there, find one that resonates with you. Find that relationship within yourself. It doesn't have to be through, a Christian church or any other specific kind of church. It's really the church within yourself, I would say, the more of the church within yourself to find that connection. Um, I'm lucky, I think, because I didn't grow up with any religion. I'm Jewish, right? So by blood, and we maybe had some practicing of certain holidays with extended family, but my father was a pastor's kid, and because of the things he witnessed in the church with the people, the hypocrisy is basically what happened when they would say one thing in church and act completely different outside, when he was over at their homes and that kind of thing. He wouldn't even go in a church. He would not even go in a church. But then sometimes when I was acting up as a teenager, all of a sudden, even though I knew nothing of religion whatsoever, he would suddenly say, "You need to do some soul searching, Megan. You need to find Jesus." And I would be like, "What are you talking about?" So I was free to explore spirituality and religion on my own and my own terms, which I think was a blessing, really. That I didn't have to so much remove the ideas that kind of indoctrinate people from early on. Those can be hard for people to kind of get out of.
Yeah, very, very much so, because it
Yeah.
all becomes ingrained within you, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's sad when people who have been brought up in the Catholic tradition are indoctrinated with the thought that, oh, it's wrong to communicate with the dead.
Right.
And, I always remember one of the earlier managers of the Arthur Findlay College, Charles Sherratt. He was going over to Rome, and he wrote a letter beforehand to ask if he could be granted an audience with the Pope. And he explained he was the manager of a Spiritualist College, etc., etc. And when eventually he got a reply, he was granted an audience with the Pope, and not only an audience with the Pope, but he was taken around parts of the Vatican that the general public don't ever get to see. And he came away thinking they knew more about communication between the two worlds than the spiritualists did. And they had their seance room, and, I thought it was rather interesting. And of course, there's been more phenomena in Catholic mysticism,
Right.
to be fair, than probably there is in the whole of spiritualism, because it's been happening for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right. Right.
It wasn't appropriate or fitting to be speaking about spiritual powers or levitation and things like that. So, in miraculous healings, raising the dead, and everything,
Yeah.
it's all there.
I find it interesting how, certain sects of these of the church believe that meditation is somehow evil. And I'm like, what do you guys think that they're doing when they're sitting there in prayer? What do you think is happening when they're sitting in the silence and the stillness? They're meditating, they're going within. That's not evil. That is our birthright. It's our birthright to be able to have this connection. So it's so interesting to just sort of try to pick apart some of the more fear-based understandings and to help people realize, that's not something you need to hold on to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But then you've got wonderful people, though he's passed now, like Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk. And, he's been, I think, outstanding in his beliefs and in the way he brought people into contemplative prayer and meditation, and really went about saying that it's time we stopped looking at a second-hand God and realized God, is within us all. And so he went a long way of sort of moving or erasing all these harsh lines that people have created, and started making the realization of God more present, more real. So I think he did such a lot. Contemplative prayer, such a remarkable human being.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah, I would love for more people to know, and I'm glad you're talking about that, to know about different examples of people that have tried to help change the thinking, within the structure of the church, and the different religious figures, I guess we could say, that have realized these things for themselves. And it's not just through, this is what's being fed to you or taught to you, but this is something, a realization that happened through the connection, through the living this, I think that's really important.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think when you move into the silence and the stillness, silence speaks. And it's very interesting just how spiritual truths seem to arise. A realization of what something means seems to sort of surface in your awareness in some way. So I think the silence, apart from the sitting in the power, I've always, I don't know why, sometimes when I've been reading, a sentence or a sacred passage has touched me, and I've taken it into a meditative state. And when you do that, this deeper, insightful knowing arises. And I didn't realize until, well, it's probably quite some years ago now, that it's called Lectio Divina, where you take a sacred passage and you ruminate over it and let the deeper, insightful meaning surface in your awareness. I just did it naturally from a very young age. Something would touch me and I would feel I've got to know what that really means. And I think that, you know, if we branch out in our thinking to other spiritual traditions, you know, as I said earlier, I've been blessed to listen to some great people over the years, you know, some of the wonderful swamis, and I mentioned some of the Buddhists earlier, and uh,
Mhm.
fascinating because it all just comes together. You may not go the whole way and believe in the entirety of it, and their belief systems, but then you can take something from it and be a bit eclectic,
Right.
and incorporate into your lifestyle, into your way of living and being. And I think that, because for me, the only thing that spiritualism lacks is giving tools, practical tools for growth, that practices that we can do to help support us on our spiritual journey, our journey of mediumistic understanding and unfoldment, and also, you know, becoming better spiritual beings. Because there's something within mediumship that if you've got a bit of an ego lurking there somewhere underneath the surface, it's going to rise up.
Mhm.
Um, and there's very, very few people that have been remarkably brilliant at what they've done within the spiritualist movement, but that have kept their feet on the ground as well. And I think that when you get that perfect balance, then you get the most remarkable expression of the power.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree. I definitely agree. I know for myself, I'm always attracted to people that are practical, grounded, honest, humble, that live from their heart, but also don't take themselves too seriously, you
Absolutely.
know, because I think that we can get in trouble if we really, it feels like almost like a binding, that happens when you start to take yourself too seriously. And uh, I just think we have to live from this creative self-expression that is like our unique soul, essentially our unique soul, our self. And I think that for myself, I've found that I'm the happiest when I am just being connected to that, to my heart and to who I really am. And realizing that everyone's sort of on their own little path, and we're all intermingled in some weird way, but that, you have to be true to yourself. And that's the best expression of you that you can be. And then I feel like you like automatically find your people, because you're
Yeah.
sort of emanating your own spirit, your energy in a certain way, and then something about their energy picks it up, and you just sort of all come together, and it makes some sort of beautiful art in its own way.
Absolutely. If you're beautiful on the inside, you'll attract beautiful people on the inside as well. And I think that's just one of the natural laws in the universe. I've never really wanted to be anybody, get anywhere, or, you know, I kind of, I'm fine where I am, and I always have been. And I think that, you know, it's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being ambitious, but I think that if you can't be happy where you are, you'll never be happy when you arrive at where you think you need to be happy.
Exactly. Because you are wherever you are, right?
Yeah,
You are you
absolutely.
wherever you are. So you have to have that, being good with yourself, right? And so like that's what I'm saying, like too, when it comes to the importance of emphasizing personal development and understanding yourself when it comes to your journey. And how you're talking about how your ego will come up in your mediumistic development, absolutely 100%. Like the things about myself that were limiting me in any other way, in any other capacity within my life, definitely came up and showed themselves to me in my mediumship. And so that was a way for me to learn and grow, because it's kind of like I'm sure you're aware that you don't realize where you are until you realize where you are. And then you don't realize that there's more layers of the onion until you start peeling it back. And you realize there's more than that. And it's the same with the surrendering, right? This idea that we're relaxed, surrendered, you realize once you get to a certain place, oh, there's even more there than you realized, right? You didn't realize
Yeah,
until you know. So it's like you have to go through it. You have to understand it from your own personal journey to really get it, and to kind of be willing to go through it. And I think if you can look at yourself and realize there's no bad parts of you. You know, there's nothing bad about you. You may have had difficult experiences. You may have been fed certain things and you've taken them in about yourselves that aren't even true, right? And you have to learn how to love all parts and accept all parts of yourself, even when there's parts that are, you know, things that maybe you don't really want to show to people so much, right? But they're a part of you, and it's all there. So I feel like emphasizing how important that aspect of our development is helps us so much in our development in general. Because, you know, I always think it's three parts. It's our spiritual development, our personal development, and our mediumistic development. And then all of those facets all play into every other aspect of our lives. So I'm always constantly saying everything comes back down to mediumship, right? There's so many examples where I'm like, oh, this is just like mediumship, right? This is the same thing. I have to like move out of the way. I have to accept what's happening and let it go. Right. And it's like these same sorts of things that are happening. Have you found your own mediumship to be helpful in your life, or like implementing these same things in your own life?
Totally, totally. I think that, you know, if somebody said to me, what was the one thing that you couldn't live without? And I do believe, you know, it's this knowledge and of this other reality and the help of the spirit world. And because I think it makes such a difference to the living of our lives, and to it doesn't give us all the answers, of course it never will, but I think it just gives us a greater realization and understanding that, you know, we aren't necessarily here, we're not here just to suffer, and we're not here just to, you know, have a walk in the park either. We're here to grow, evolve and learn. And so I always try and ask myself, when situations present themselves, you know, what is it I need to learn? And I think that that's the important thing, because sometimes, you know, people are stuck in these repetitive cycles, aren't they? Because they're not listening and they're not looking at what it is they need to learn about their own selves. I think that is a beautiful saying. You know, because we only ever know um, our life from the inside looking out, don't we? And so we always have this sense of that somebody else is far better or kinder or nicer or more evolved than we are. And really, we're all the same, aren't we? We all have our equal share of, you know, good, beautiful, kind qualities. And we all have those moments where we go through self-doubt and anxiety, and we lose a sense of connection with source, if you want to call it that, source energy, you know, the realization that we are divine and eternal. There's a beautiful saying that my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. I
That's so
just love
funny.
that. And I often think about that to myself when I get, you know, caught up with worry. People sometimes say, you worry? I said, yeah, you know, I grew up with a parent that, you know, was positively negative. You know,
Mhm.
she made everything a worry. And it's very, very hard, if you have somebody like that in your life, not to adopt that same mindset. So from a very young age, I thought, no, I'm going to view the world differently. I'm going to view the world as a friendly, loving, benevolent place until I find out otherwise. You
Yeah.
know, but sometimes the doubts and the worries and fears take over, as it does everybody. You see, we're all in it together, aren't we? And that's the joy of the journey. And I think that's why we should always reach out and be kind.
Yeah.
Um, you know, beautifully beautiful saying by Mother Teresa, that there are more people hungry in the world for love than there is food. And I think that's true. So many people are lonely. So many people think whatever is going on in their mind, they're the only person that ever thinks like that.
Right.
And I think that, you know, we are all the same, um, at the end of the day, and we're all just trying to do our best.
I agree. I agree. I can relate to what you're saying as far as having a worrying parent. You know, I had a worrying parent. I had one, and then I also had the other tell me my whole life, Megan, life's a bitch and then you die.
Yes, I've heard that one a lot. Definitely.
Yeah.
Or you'll never get out of it alive.
Yeah. And the other one was, do you know the golden rule? The golden rule is he who makes the gold makes the rules. That was what I grew up with. So I had to find my way outside of that perspective.
Isn't it funny? You know,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's so incredible because most people that I've ever met always have one parent that's a challenge. You know, unfortunate if you have two, but then you've got to look at it like, you know, they're just your teachers. They're
Right,
teaching you how not to be.
right.
They're being a really good example of how not to behave.
Yes. No, yeah. And and that's the other thing is no one's just one thing, we're no one. And we tend to cast people as you are good, you are bad,
Yeah,
depending on what it is. And we can't do that. Like even people that do bad things aren't bad people necessarily, right? There's qualities about them that are loving and good, and they still have a mother and a brother and a daughter and a whatever. And these people mean something to that person, right? And so we have this sort of sad limited idea of how we view people, one another, and I think that needs to change as well. And I know we're kind of veering slightly, but everything, like I said, everything comes back down to the same principles with mediumship and how we live our lives, how we act, and that's we're the living embodiment of what we're doing, what we're teaching, what we're doing as mediums as well. So I think that's still something to remember too, because there are mediums that, when they're on the platform, they're one way. When they're living their life, they're a complete different way. Um, and that's unfortunate.
it's unfortunate.
you know?
Absolutely. But I think the more we
Yeah.
aspire to be better every day,
Yeah.
I think, sometimes we will trip up and mess up and fail, but that's okay. I think
Yeah.
me, it's in the trying and, trying not to entertain a negative thought or an unkind thought or, just stopping it. I
Right.
think little things like that, I think little steps, that's realistic, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, because a lot of people have said to me, how come there are mediums that are good at what they do, but they're not nice or kind people. And it is I've thought about that a lot, and I personally have come to the conclusion that if we really have a specific spiritual power or gift, possibly in the history of you the individual, you've earned that right. Now what you do with it this life, that's your choice. But you'll bet most from your ability if you try and work at spiritualizing yourself, being the best version of you that you can be. I think that's a really, really important thing.
I agree. And like we were saying earlier, we're not going to be perfect. That's not really what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to just be better for our version of better, right?
Yeah,
Did you get that ping inside you, that thing that's sort of like, ooh, that wasn't very nice of me to do, or I should have done that better, right? We get that internal knowing. And so those are the things we need to listen to, not necessarily what other people's views of how we should be, right? Because we're here to live a physical life. We're here to experience all the different things that entails. So if you go out and have a party and do whatever, that's okay, but be nice when you're doing it. Still try to be a nice person, but yeah, we'll fail. Absolutely. We will fail sometimes. And that's all a part of it too.
totally. I don't think we we're not we are supposed to, I say, to experience the fruits of existence. I think that's part of it, and I think
Mhm.
that leading or living a spiritual life isn't that we have to be pious and
Right.
superior and holier than thou. It's about being real,
Hmm.
being authentic,
Hmm.
speaking the truth, and just making that extra effort each day to do something kind for somebody else. And the more you move outside your own space and start thinking of others, the easier it becomes. And I think the more you work at loving others, the easier it becomes. It's a funny thing that, the more you work on loving, the easier it becomes to love. And
Hmm.
until you get to a place you are just so filled with this love, it's just the most incredible feeling. And
Hmm.
I think that's what these great spiritual teachers like the Dalai Lama and beautiful Archbishop Desmond Tutu passed very recently. Beautiful, beautiful souls that have always lived a life to be of support and help to others.
Hmm.
Um, I think we're here to make a difference. I think we're here to know love. We're here to make a difference, to leave the world a little richer and more beautiful after we've passed by. I think that's the whole point. And we're adding to this great symphony of existence in some way, I think.
Mhm. I love that. It's beautiful. And I
Yeah,
agree.
about finding what makes your soul sing. And once you've found that, stay with it. Don't give up on it. When the going gets a little bit difficult, don't bail out the boat and say, oh, well, I'm not doing this anymore. And, you know, and, you know, as far as mediumship is concerned, if you, because everybody experiences moments of where doubt or what's happening or what's going on. And I think you've just got to sit in the silence and stillness and then offer to the other world, you know, what do you want to teach me? What do
Mhm.
I need to learn from this experience? Because there's always something there. And when you've learned uh, that lesson, you won't repeat it, because you know you will grow and progress from it. And I think that's the real joy of mediumship. Can never get bored.
Right.
Can never get bored.
Always a surprise, literally every time. It's new and a surprise, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I do think there's something to be said about, you know, sometimes there's precedents in our lives that need to take, you know, place of mediumship for a time, right? So there's certain things that happen where we have to take a break, and to know that's okay, that our mediumship's not going to disappear, right? It's not going to go away just because we're tending to our physical lives in a way that need it in that
Yeah,
moment. um I think there's a lot of fear from mediums, especially newer developing mediums, that if they have some sort of you know, catastrophe happening in their life, that if they step away to deal with that, then something will happen to their mediumship. But it's important that we deal with our physical issues first, because we can't really be there for the spirit in the right way if we're not doing that, you know?
really, absolutely right, totally. You know, we have to be present. Our first duty is to ourselves, to our life here. You know, if you've got young family and there's issues and problems, then you've got to deal with that. You know, that's your duty and responsibility. And you'll come back, even if you have to take a side step, you'll come back the stronger and the richer because of that. Because in
Mhm.
somewhere, everything we experience is an opportunity to learn and to grow. And you know, and I think everybody's a work of art, really. You know, everything is art. Everything has its own beauty, its own rhythm, its own pattern. And it's always about taking the path of least resistance. You know, if you've got problems coming up, then deal with the problems.
Mhm.
You know, don't put them aside and wrap them up in a bag and hope they'll go away. Deal with it. And what is there in the learning? And then, you know, because as you rightfully said, your spiritual abilities are there. They're not going to go away anywhere. They're not, you know, they're not going to forget you. It's part of each of us.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's part of being human, and being spiritual and spiritually aware and divine, all wrapped up in one, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Yeah. Some of us are, you know, artwork more like Picasso sometimes, or Dali, and some of us are more like Rembrandt's. Couple different ones,
Oh,
but beautiful, you know, all beautiful.
yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
so I know we're getting into, we've been talking for quite some time. So I wanted to see if you would like to read that second passage.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Um, I particularly want to read this little bit because it's from the trance teachings from a beautiful soul who is just called the Pioneer, who communicates through me, and very insightful. But this little bit um, is about the spirit world, and I thought it was just rather lovely. Rich and diverse landscapes stretch endlessly into a sense of spaciousness. A certain familiarity exists in comparison with earthly landscapes, and yet striking differences occur. It is as though an impression experienced within your mind can change or alter the appearance of things, yet only by virtue of degrees. You may, subject to inner desire, change the colour of a flower, as the environment seems to clothe itself in the shape of your thoughts, bringing great comfort to the soul. It is only possible to alter an aspect of something. It is not possible to change your entire surroundings, as it is not only your landscape. In truth, it belongs to all, whilst at the same time being a reflection of the soul's innermost feelings. I thought that was rather revealing.
That's lovely. Yeah.
Nice thought how you can change something in the landscape and by the applied intent and direction of our thoughts. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, it makes sense too, as far as, the studies they've done on plants, right? There's a study they've done on plants that if we feel and say loving thoughts to them, they grow and become beautiful and full. And if we do the opposite, if we say negative things, and this is really more about our energy than the words, right? The energy we're putting out, then they die and they don't grow properly. And so this is actually scientifically been studied. So backing up what our lovely pioneer of mediumship that is coming through you is saying. So our thoughts are, and our thoughts really do go into our energy, and our energy affects everything around us. So just like if we go into a space that just had a fight, people that are sensitive will probably pick up this sense of that energy there in the space. And if we go to a place where people have been praying, that's a holy place, a sacred place, we'll feel that in the energy there. So it makes sense that we need to remember our energy affects those around us, other people, the spaces around us, and the other life around us, which also has its own consciousness, which are the plants and nature and all of that. I believe that it has its own consciousness.
Everything does. Yeah. Life has consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that part of the book is a little bit of gathered wisdom from the trance teachings over the years. It's just snippets. It's just thoughts to, enrich and contemplate, basically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Again, I really love the book. I had a funny sort of a thing that happened the other night when I was going to read the book. I went to take my dog outside to go to the potty, because that's what happens at nighttime. But I was looking up at the sky and I was looking at the stars, and I was thinking, I'm on a big rock going throughout the infinite universe. And I'm like, that's just a weird thought, to just think about that. And I was looking up, and there was sort of a marine layer of clouds that were there. And I saw a face in the clouds, and I thought, is that really a face, or is that just nothing? And I thought, well, the spirit world can use anything in the natural world to communicate. So it could be a face, it could be something, right? It could be, though I know our minds look for faces and things, right? So I'm aware of that as well. But then I went to go read the book, and I got to the part where I was talking about mantra. And my hand was actually naturally covered, the part where it showed which mantras were whatever. Anyway, but you said in the book, let a number come to you, 1 through 6, to pick the mantra. A 6 came to my mind, and then it was Om Tara, and that's about the stars. And I had just been looking at the stars and wondering, and it's about the truth of the universe, or giving the truth of what it is. And I was just wondering about that. I'm like, that's so funny.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's really lovely. You get little moments of synchronicity like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice.
I think that that's part of the magic of this world, going back to the magic. And I think sometimes people discount these things because of their thinking mind, and they think, oh, that's foolish or whatever. But I think they're missing out on these magical moments when the universe and spirit can talk to us in some way. And they may feel insignificant in some way at the time, but then they kind of unfold into something else, and speak to you and show you something. And I think that the more open we can be to realizing that, and I think the indigenous peoples, right? The indigenous peoples know this, and we've missed out on so much of their wisdom because of our egos, because of our ideas of we're better and we're this and we're that, in the Western society of how we live our lives. And I think we've really shot ourselves in the foot, and obviously harmed them as well through a lot of our activities. But we're missing so much wisdom that should naturally just be occurring to us,
Yeah, but in reflection of what you were just speaking about just now, the spirit world said recently in the trance states that we're living at a time when all the wrong of the past is like coming to the surface to be put right. And I think that is when I say recently, probably a couple of years ago,
Mm.
but I think that's very evident in the times that we're living now, that, you know, we're needing to go back to the roots and to that which is authentic and real, and find our way again, find our way home, and to ourselves, to each other,
Mhm.
uh, with our greater connection with life and existence, and honoring the wisdom teachings from these beautiful indigenous cultures.
Mhm. I absolutely agree. And I think that feels like a lovely place to end this conversation. Um, thank you so much for coming and taking the time to talk with me and to, you know, the audience that will hear this. And I really find that this conversation, I think will be valuable to people, and hearing your thoughts, your wisdom, and just thank you for sharing your time and your words with us today.
Thank you so much, Megan, for inviting me. It's just been a real joy. Thank you.
Thank you.